Alex's life was perfectly ordinary until the day it wasn't. A single notification shatters his sense of security, unraveling everything he thought he knew about his marriage, his family, and even himself. As he scrambles to make sense of the betrayal, his 10-year-old son, Jason, remains eerily composed. While Alex struggles with anger and heartbreak, Jason is already working on a solution. But the deeper Alex digs, the more unsettling the truth becomes.
My wife wiped out our son's college fund and ran off with her boyfriend. I will never forget the day my world crumbled. It started like any other, a mundane Tuesday filled with work emails, Jason's half-hearted attempts at homework, and the familiar hum of the coffee maker in the background. Nothing seemed off. Nothing warned me of the storm brewing in the distance. If I'd known, maybe I would have done something differently, though in hindsight I doubt it. Some disasters are inevitable. I was sitting in the living room, scrolling through bills on my laptop when the notification popped up. Your balance has fallen below the minimum threshold. That was odd. The college fund had more than enough in it. 6 years of careful saving for Jason's future. Laura and I had both agreed it was untouchable. It wasn't a conversation we needed to revisit because we both knew how much it meant, or so I thought. I logged into the account expecting to see some sort of mistake, maybe a glitch. Banks mess up all the time, right? But no, the truth hit me like a freight train. The account was empty. Not low balance, empty. No transactions in sight. I stared at the screen, the numbers burning into my eyes, hoping, praying it was a joke. But it wasn't. Laura? I called, my voice shaky. No response. I tried again, louder this time, but the silence that answered was deafening. She wasn't home. That's when the sinking realization crept in. Laura had been acting strange for weeks, distant, a little too dressed up for her errands, brushing off questions about where she was going with vague excuses. I chalked it up to stress, life, whatever. Never once had I thought. I grabbed my phone and dialed her number, straight to voicemail. I tried again. Same result. My heart was pounding now, every beat thumping in my chest like a drum. Jason wandered into the room, munching on an apple, oblivious to the chaos unraveling before him. "Where's Mom?" I asked, trying to sound calm for his sake. He shrugged, taking another bite. "She said she had to go somewhere." Somewhere. That word felt like a dagger twisting in my gut. My hands were shaking as I opened our joint credit card account. Maybe I didn't want to see what I already suspected, but I couldn't stop myself. And there it was, transaction after transaction. Flights, luxury hotels, high-end restaurants. My wife was halfway across the country, living it up on money meant for our son's future. I didn't want Jason to see me fall apart, but it was hard. My mind raced with how could she do this? How could she take from our son, from the one person who had nothing to do with our issues? Sure, we've been arguing lately. Sure, things hadn't been perfect, but this was unforgivable. Jason must have noticed the look on my face because he came over and put a hand on my shoulder. "Dad, it's fine," he said with a smile that was too calm, too knowing. I fixed everything. At the time, I thought he was just trying to make me feel better. Kids don't understand the weight of betrayal, the depth of loss. They see things in black and white, good guys and bad guys, problems and solutions. I wanted to believe his words were innocent, but even then something about his tone felt off, like he knew more than he was letting on. I didn't have the energy to press him. My focus was on Laura. I tried calling again, but it was useless. It wasn't until later that night, when I checked the closet and saw her suitcase missing, that the truth hit me in full force. She wasn't coming back. She had emptied the account, packed her bags, and walked out on her family, on me, on Jason. The anger came in waves, each one more intense than the last. I wasn't just furious at her. I was furious at myself. How could I have missed the signs? How could I have let this happen under my nose? Every transaction, every lie played on repeat in my mind like a cruel movie I couldn't turn off. Jason stayed quiet most of the evening, watching me with that same calm expression. When he finally went to bed, I sat alone in the dark, replaying the last few months, trying to find answers. But there weren't any. There was just a gaping hole where trust used to be and a betrayal so deep it threatened to swallow me whole. I'd like to say I found some clarity that night, some resolve to move forward, but I didn't. All I found was the cold, bitter truth. The woman I loved had chosen herself over her family, and there was no coming back from that. What I didn't know as I sat there drowning in my grief was that Jason had already started working on a solution, one I couldn't have imagined in my wildest dreams. The days following Laura's betrayal were a blur. I was barely functional, running on autopilot, consumed by anger, confusion, and heartbreak. But Jason was unshaken. If anything, he was eerily composed for a 10-year-old whose mother had just abandoned him. He still went to school, still did his homework, still played with his Legos like nothing had changed. At first I chalked it up to shock. Kids process trauma differently, right? But the truth was, Jason wasn't ignoring the situation. He was working on it. It started small. I'd catch him typing furiously on his tablet, his face scrunched up in concentration. He'd glance at me and quickly minimize the screen, brushing it off with a casual "just homework, Dad." I didn't think much of it at the time. After all, he'd always been a whiz with technology, coding, gaming, whatever. It was his thing. But then there were the whispered phone calls. "Who are you talking to?" I asked one evening, catching him in the kitchen with the phone pressed to his ear. He looked startled, like a deer caught in headlights. Nobody," he said, shoving the phone into his pocket and hurrying out of the room. I didn't press him. I figured he was talking to a friend, or maybe even a counselor from school. Everyone handles grief differently, I told myself. Maybe this was his way of coping. Then there was the garage. Jason started spending hours in there, tinkering with tools and wires. I didn't pay much attention. At first I assumed he was working on one of his little engineering projects. He'd always been good at building things. Robots, model planes, stuff like that. But one night, curiosity got the better of me. I wandered into the garage to see what he was up to, and what I found stopped me cold. There was a whiteboard covered in diagrams, equations, and flowcharts. It looked like something out of a spy movie. Next to it was a laptop with lines of code scrolling across the screen. Jason was sitting at the workbench, soldering something that looked suspiciously like a listening device. When he saw me, he jumped up, trying to block the whiteboard with his small frame. "What's all this?" I asked, genuinely baffled. "Nothing, Dad. Just a project for school," he said, too quickly, too defensively. I raised an eyebrow. "A school project? Since when does 4th grade require surveillance equipment?" Jason's face turned red, and for a moment I thought he might actually confess. But then he just shrugged and muttered, "You wouldn't get it," before packing up his tools and heading back inside. I stood there staring at the whiteboard, my head spinning. Whatever Jason was working on, it wasn't for school, and it wasn't just a hobby. As the days went on, the strange behavior only escalated. Jason started asking oddly specific questions about Laura's finances. Did she have other accounts? Did I know her passwords? Did she ever talk about offshore investments? At first I thought he was just being curious, but then I realized he was gathering information. "Why do you want to know all this?" I asked one evening. Jason shrugged, not looking up from his tablet. "No reason, just wondering." "Jason," I said, my voice firm, "this isn't normal. If something's bothering you, you need to tell me." He finally looked up, his expression unreadable. "I told you that. I'm fixing it. You'll see." That night, I couldn't sleep. Jason's words kept echoing in my mind. Fixing it? What could he possibly mean by that? I thought about confronting him, demanding answers, but something held me back. Maybe it was exhaustion, or maybe it was a small, irrational part of me that trusted him. Trusted that he really did know what he was doing. The next morning, I found him in the kitchen, typing away on his laptop. He didn't even notice me standing there watching him. His fingers flew across the keyboard with the kind of confidence that didn't belong to a 10-year-old. "Jason," I said softly, and he froze. "Yeah, Dad?" I wanted to ask him what he was doing, what he was planning, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I just said, "Breakfast is ready," and walked away. Looking back, I should have pressed him harder. I should have demanded to know what he was up to. But part of me didn't want to know. Part of me was afraid of what I might find out. Over the next few days, Jason's behavior became more secretive. He stopped leaving his tablet unattended, locked the garage whenever he was working, and even started covering the whiteboard with a sheet when he wasn't using it. And then, just as I was starting to convince myself that it was all harmless, Laura called. It was late afternoon when my phone rang. I was standing by the kitchen sink, staring blankly out the window, still trying to piece my life back together. Jason was in the living room, playing on his tablet, completely immersed as usual. I glanced at the caller ID and froze. My first instinct was to let it ring. Why should I answer? What could she possibly say to justify what she'd done? But curiosity got the better of me, and against my better judgment, I picked up. "What do you want?" My voice was cold, sharper than I intended, but I didn't care. "Alex," she cried, her voice frail and trembling. "Oh my God, Alex, you have to help me. Help me." The audacity of her request made my blood boil. Help you? I spat. You emptied our son's college fund and ran off with your boyfriend. Why on earth would I help you? Alex, please, just listen to me, she begged, her voice cracking. Something's gone wrong. Everything's gone wrong. I leaned against the counter, gripping the edge to steady myself. What are you talking about? It's Damien, she said, almost sobbing. He's gone. Just disappeared. All his accounts are frozen and so are mine. I can't access anything, Alex. Nothing. And now the police are looking for me. Her words hit me like a slap, but it wasn't sympathy I felt. It was satisfaction. Cold, heartless satisfaction. I wanted to ask her how it felt to be stranded, powerless, abandoned the way she left Jason and me. But I stayed silent, letting her dig her own grave. Alex, please, she continued, her desperation growing. I don't know what's happening. I don't know who did this, but I need your help. I'm stuck in Miami with no money, no ID, nothing. Damien said he'd take care of everything and now he's just gone. Sounds like a real stand-up guy, I said dryly, unable to resist the jab. She didn't even acknowledge it, too consumed by her panic. I swear, Alex, I didn't mean for any of this to happen. You just what, Laura? I snapped, my anger finally boiling over. You just stole from your own son. You just walked out on your family for some guy who clearly doesn't give a damn about you. Is that what you didn't mean to happen? There was a long pause on the other end, broken only by the sound of her shaky breathing. I made a mistake, she whispered. A mistake? I barked out a bitter laugh. You don't get to call this a mistake, Laura. You made a choice. A selfish, cruel choice. And now you're paying for it. Alex, please, she said again, her voice barely audible. I have nothing. I don't know what to do. I need you. I opened my mouth to reply, but before I could, Jason appeared in the doorway holding his tablet. Who's on the phone? He asked, his tone casual as if this were any other day. I covered the receiver and whispered, it's your mom. Jason's face darkened for a brief moment, but then that same calm, knowing smile spread across his lips. Put it on speaker, he said. Jason, trust me, dead. Put it on speaker, he interrupted, his tone firm. Something in his voice made me hesitate. This wasn't a request, it was a command. I didn't understand why, but I found myself obeying. I pressed the speaker button and set the phone down on the counter. Laura, I said, my voice hardening. You're on speaker now. Jason's here. There was a sharp intake of breath on her end. Jason, she said, her voice softening. Sweetheart, it's mommy. Save it, Jason interrupted, his tone cold and emotionless. I don't want to hear it. Jason, please, she pleaded. I know I hurt you. I know I made a mistake. But you didn't just make a mistake, he said, cutting her off again. You betrayed us. You stole my future. And now you're calling us because you want our help. That's pathetic. I stared at him, stunned. This wasn't the voice of a 10-year-old. This was the voice of someone older, wiser, darker. Laura, Jason whispered, his voice breaking. I'm your mother. I love you. I don't love me, he said bluntly. If you did, you wouldn't have left. You wouldn't have stolen from me. You chose Damien over us, and now you're paying the price. I don't feel sorry for you, Jason. Please. She sobbed. I'm begging you. Please help me. He smiled then, a chilling, confident smile that sent a shiver down my spine. Don't worry, Mom, he said. I already did, her voice laced with confusion. What? Let's just say, he replied, his tone almost gleeful. Damien won't be around to hurt anyone anymore. And neither will you. The line went dead. I stood there staring at Jason, my mind racing. What did you do? I whispered. He looked up at me, his eyes calm, almost proud. I told you, Dad, he said. I fixed everything. When Jason uttered those words, I fixed everything. I didn't know whether to feel proud, horrified, or completely confused. My 10-year-old son, standing there with that unnerving calmness, had just silenced his panicking mother with a cryptic remark that left me more unsettled than ever. My mind raced with possibilities, each one more absurd than the last. What could he have done? He's just a kid, right, Jason? I said, trying to keep my voice steady. What do you mean you fixed everything? What did you do? He shrugged casually as if we were discussing his math homework. It's like I said, Dad, Mom and Damien can't hurt us anymore. I felt my stomach twist into a knot. Jason, this isn't a game. You need to tell me exactly what you've done. He sighed like a parent indulging a child's endless questions and motioned for me to follow him into the living room. Okay, fine. I'll show you. We sat down on the couch and he opened his tablet. The screen lit up with a dizzying array of charts, bank statements, and what looked like coding scripts. My pulse quickened as he started explaining, his voice calm and methodical, as if he were presenting a science project. Remember how Mom drained my college fund? He began. Well, I figured if she could take the money, I could take it back. I stared at him, speechless, as he pulled up a series of bank transactions. Sure enough, the $50,000 Laura had stolen was back in the account. Not just sitting there, but reorganized and invested in a way that made my head spin. How did you? I stammered. Easy, he said, as if accessing bank accounts was as simple as tying his shoes. Mom wasn't exactly careful with her passwords. I just used the one she saved on her phone to access her accounts. Damien, he wasn't any smarter. Once I was in, I transferred the money back to where it belongs. That's illegal, I said, though my voice lacked conviction. He shrugged again. So is stealing from your kid. I couldn't argue with that, but my unease deepened as he continued scrolling. The bank transfers were just the beginning. Jason had done more, much more. Damien had a bunch of accounts in his name, Jason said, pointing to the screen. Turns out he's been scamming people for years. Fake investments, shell companies, stuff like that. I reported everything to the authorities, gave them all the evidence they need to lock him up for good. You reported him? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Yup, he said, not even blinking. I even made sure the trail led back to Mom, too, he added with a smirk that chilled me to the bone. She helped him spend the money, so technically she's part of the scam. Now the police are watching her too. Jason, do you understand what you've done? I said, my voice rising. This isn't just about getting the money back. You've put your mother in serious trouble. She put herself in trouble, he shot back, his tone sharper now. She chose Damien over us. She chose herself over us. Why should I feel sorry for her? I didn't know how to respond. He was right, of course. Laura had betrayed us in the worst possible way. But hearing those words come from my son, delivered with such icy detachment, made my chest ache. This wasn't just a 10-year-old taking a stand. I thought this was something darker. And Damien? I asked, dreading the answer. Jason grinned. Oh, don't worry. He's fine for now. He just doesn't have any money or anywhere to hide. The authorities froze all his accounts. By the time they find him, he'll be broke and in jail. The casual way he said it, like destroying a man's life, was no different than squashing a bug, sent a shiver down my spine. Jason, I said, choosing my words carefully, why didn't you tell me about this before? Why didn't you let me handle it? He looked up at me, his expression suddenly softer. Because I knew you wouldn't do anything. You just let her get away with it because you're too nice. Someone had to stop her, Dad. Someone had to protect us now.